Don't forget to like or subscribe, I greatly appreciate it. Your support means more great mock reviews in the future. We just passed 200 subscribers, and I want to thank you all very much for helping me cross that milestone. I truly appreciate all of your amazing support, words of encouragement, and conversation, both public and private, about LEGO Star Wars so far. I finally finished flying Waffle's T-47 Snowspeeder model the other day, and it is the subject of today's review. The T-47s, of course, squared off against Blizzard Squadron in the Battle of Hoth in The Empire Strikes Back, and the speeder gets a ton of screen time from a number of different angles, and it's definitely one of my personal favorites. I remember, again, watching The Empire Strikes Back in theaters, the special edition with my dad, and I remember seeing this for the first time on the screen, and it completely blew me away. In my reviews, I cover aesthetics, parts issues you might want to look out for, the build experience, the model's integrity, and I offer a conclusion. If you're watching this, I assume you have a general interest in building mocks, you've taken a look at the instructions or are interested in buying them, and I assume a base level knowledge with Brickling's ordering system. My disclaimer on this and all my mock reviews is that I only use genuine LEGO bricks. I always purchase the instructions for myself for my own personal enjoyment and in the hopes that my advice will make your experience more enjoyable and or less expensive. It should be no surprise that the model looks about as accurate as one could expect at this scale, with a lot of fun details and some clever connections. The angles in the front marry up extremely well, and the connection for these two triangular sections here is really clever. Bit hard to see, but basically it involves bars with claw handles, pneumatic T-junctions, and rounded 1x2 plates with open studs. The exhaust fins in the back are angled ever so slightly, and there are flaps in the correct positions both on top and below. And there's even some detailing with these printed hemisphere tiles underneath the top flaps, which is a nice touch, albeit slightly more expensive. I wasn't able to find a Canon top-down view to compare the shape, but to any reasonable approximation, the 3x2 and 6x3 wedge plates are pretty much perfect. There's great color patterning in all the right places, and even on the underside. The cockpit is probably, I would say, one stud too wide to be Canon accurate, but there's not much to improve on with the four stud implementation here, and it even hinges in the correct location, like so. I also really like the implementation of the transparent roof with the well, the roof window with the transparent panel here. Very nice. The interior of the cockpit surrounds the pilot and the gunner with the array of instrumentation panels you would expect. And a bit tough to see in this light, but there are some rudimentary controls with minifigure hands back in there. Let's see if I can. And it's a bit tough to see, but you can kind of see the black minifigure hand pieces representing controls, both for the pilot and the gunner. The dark tan seats are a nice accent, and I also really appreciate this orange slope piece here, and I think that represents the small orange section of paint right above the gray stripe here in the front that you can see in the movies. So with the cockpit down, you can see that the orange continues past that gray stripe. So very well done there. Moving back to the harpoon and choke cable, I think the specified parts, this is a 3L bar, and the actual part calls for a screwdriver. I had trouble finding that one, so I substituted a minifigure wand. I think both of these are too long, but I mean, they look great. Um, and I think that if I was able to find the screwdriver and I used the minifigure wand, that would actually be closer to the actual size. The actual harpoon and grappling hook. Um, I posted about this on Instagram. Lego string is still the worst. So if you're so inclined to deal with it, there's a really nice implementation here with the grappling hook, the string, and a hidden spool behind the exhaust fins here. And then instructions for a gear to wind it back in are, well, I'm sorry, this gear is part of the instructions, so you can wind it back up. Obviously, the grappling hook is way too large to be scale accurate, but again, it's not that big of a deal. So overall, you can see pretty much every angle. The speeder just looks really, really good. You've got the dark bluish gray engine detailing visible from the front, this triangular piece. The blasters look good. Just overall, really well done. The last thing I'm going to talk about is color choice. So this is obviously the gray version. I chose gray because I already have a lot of the parts, but as I was building this, and I kind of knew this was going to happen, but I wish I had gone with white. The gray version seems kind of dark to me. I've got it under the lights here, so it doesn't look as, I mean, it doesn't look bad, but it doesn't look as dark as it normally does. But kind of like the Jirac Red 5, I wish there was some kind of Lego color that was lighter than light bluish gray, but darker than white. It would be perfect for most of the Star Wars vehicles. And I think the Snowspeeders and Empire are clearly white with the typical Rebel wear and tear that give it some shades of gray. So if I was going to do a white version, I would probably replace some of the white tiling that you can see along the sides here with some light bluish gray or sand blue or tan to give it that weathered look. Don't get me wrong though, the gray version does look really, really good. Even for a fairly small build with 151 elements and 526 parts, there are a significant number of part substitutions that I recommend. The two 1x2, 1x4 brackets, part 2436, and the one 2x2 inverted bracket, part 99207, specified in black, are completely hidden and they can be any color. The four 1x2 brackets, part 99781, are barely visible on the bottom. You can just see the edge of them right here, and right here, and here. I would stick with orange, light bluish gray, or dark bluish gray, but they definitely don't have to be black. The six headlight bricks, specified in black, part 4070, are almost completely hidden under the flaps. You can see the studs of two of them here, and the third one is underneath that printed tile. They're only partially visible with the flaps up, obviously, and light bluish gray, dark bluish gray, orange, or black would be perfectly fine here. I substituted dark bluish gray. I was actually very surprised the two brick modified 1x1 with studs on two sides adjacent, part 26604, were specified in tan. You can see them in the front here. Light bluish gray or dark bluish gray would fit better with the overall color scheme, but they're fine as is. You're not really going to see them unless you're really picking this up and moving them around. The two brick modified 1x1 with studs on two sides opposite, part 47905, specified in dark bluish gray, can be any color. The four black brick modified 1x2 with studs on one side, part 11211, are completely hidden and can be any color. The 6 hinge bricks 1x2 top plates 3938 and 2 hinge brick 2x2 top plate 6134 form the edge inside the cockpit area. Again, hard to see in this light. You can kind of see them back here. Black is specified, but dark bluish gray, light bluish gray, or even tan would work. The 6L hose in black, part 75C06, does not need to be black, but it does need to be exactly 6L long. Pretty much any color will work here. And this goes behind, it clips into the assembly for the engine fins, and then that in turn clips onto the fuselage here. And so it's basically impossible to see because it's black, but it's all behind here. And even if it was a bright color, you're not going to see it. There are 4 minifigure neck bracket with back stud, thick back wall, specified in light bluish gray. 2 of them have to be light bluish gray because they connect the cannons to the wing pieces on both sides. But the other 2 can be omitted entirely, as I don't really see what function they serve, and the instruction notes basically say the same thing. They go behind here. If I were to take this off, you would see them. The ones I have are in reddish brown, I think. But as far as I can tell, they serve no purpose. For the harpoon gun, the black bar 3L, part 87994, and the black screwdriver 3-rib handle, part 11402A, are okay as far as appearance goes, but the screwdriver is definitely not common. You could also look for a 6-rib screwdriver, part 6246A, or like I have here, the minifigure utensil wand, part 36752. The 2-plate 1x8 in dark tan, part 3460, form this interior edge of the cockpit. 1x8 in light bluish gray or dark bluish gray, or tiles of the same length would also work. And same with the 2 dark tan plate modified 1x4 with 2 studs without groove, part 92593. And you can see these here at the bottom of the cockpit area, way down there, forms part of the pilot's seat. 2 of the 4 black slope 30 1x1 by 2/3 part 54200 can be any color, as they are completely hidden. The other 2 are visible in the cockpit area, and are in positions where they would likely be a control panel. Thus, light bluish gray or dark bluish gray work, as well as trans clear, trans yellow, trans blue, trans orange, or really whatever you're happy with. The 6 slope 30 1x2 by 2/3 part 85984 are in black, are completely hidden and can be any color. And you can see 2 of them are supposed to go right here, and clearly I did not use black. The 4 tap 1x1s, part 4599B, are specified without the holes in the nozzle. This is the newer style, but the older one with the hole in the nozzle works just fine if you have them, and they can be pretty much any color as they're basically impossible to see in the finished model. The taps connect to the minifigure hand pieces that form the controls, and you can see that even if I turn this with this or that, I mean, it's impossible to see them. Don't worry about it. The 2 Technic brick 1x1 with hole in reddish brown, part 6541, are basically completely hidden and can be any color. They go underneath this vented tile there, and it secures the back part of the blaster cannon. The Technic gear, 14-tooth bevel, part 4143 in light gray, seems to be a rarer part. Any thin gear will work if you're actually planning to use the grappling hook and string and need to wind it back up. But speaking of that, if you don't care about this feature, and honestly there were basically only 2 reasons I built this as specified, the first being to do a review, and the second because I already had the grappling hook, the string, and the spool. You can leave out a bunch of parts that will almost certainly shorten your stores list and save you some money. The grappling hook, part 30192, the 2x2 inverted bracket, part 99207, I mentioned earlier this could be any color, the string reel 2x2 drum, part 2585, and the string reel 2x2 holder, part 2584, the Technic Axle 3, part 4519, and the 14-tooth Technic gear. The Technic Pin 3L without friction ridges in light bluish gray is a less common part. I actually didn't even know they made this until I saw it. You can use 3 of the common Technic Pin 1/2s, part 4274, or 2 Technic Pin 1/2s and 1 Technic Pin without friction ridges lengthwise, part 3673 in light bluish gray. 3673 is slightly more common. They do have to be light bluish gray because they're used in the blaster cannons, and I will show you exactly where they go. They form the tip here. Basically, this 2L Technic pin plus this Technic pin at 1/2 take the place of that 3L Technic pin. So you slide that on there. This clips in here, and you're good to go. And lastly, these printed half circle tiles, part 24246 PB01, 001, excuse me, go under the wing flaps and are optional in my opinion. You could replace these with light bluish gray or dark bluish gray or black or flat silver, and I think they'd be fine. The build is fairly straightforward and goes pretty fast. It took me about 2 hours spread over 3 days without doing any sorting ahead of time, and if I have an uninterrupted stretch of time, it probably would not have taken me that long at all. There's only 526 parts in the first place, which eliminates the main source of delay for me, which is hunting for the part. The instructions are excellent, and Flying Waffle and/or Brick Vault has some very helpful notes at the appropriate sections to how to make certain connections or how to orient specific parts. Each part to be added is highlighted with a red outline, which in my opinion is better than highlighting the entire part because it doesn't obscure the part's color. Overall, a very, very nice job with the instructions. Probably some of the best that I've seen for a mock. As far as model integrity goes, you can definitely pick up the Snowspeeder and swish it. I mean, as long as you're holding it like this, or even back here, even this connection with the harpoon is pretty solid. And these two circular tiles are a nice aim point, if you will. And then you can see that I'm just holding it on the solid middle part down here. As long as you're holding it like that, it's perfectly fine. You get as much playability out of holding it this way that you could ever need, really. There are some obvious weak areas. The harpoon, well, I just said this connection was steady, or was sturdy, but obviously if you bump this the wrong way, it's going to come off. But there are some other ones that are less obvious just from looking at it, and I discovered these while I was building it. The canopy section, it connects to the rear of the cockpit area with the 4 studs underneath this windscreen here. But you notice that it's completely unsupported along its entire length. There's enough friction in these clips to pull off the entire assembly, especially if you don't have it connected correctly, or sturdily, I should say. So occasionally when you're trying to open the cockpit, you just pull the entire thing off. Oh, that's actually pretty good. Well, now that I'm trying to demo it, it doesn't work, of course, but that's fine. Trust me, it happens sometimes. I was saying that the windscreen's not supported anywhere underneath here except for on the front and the back. So basically, if you push down on the clip part, you can see the entire thing just kind of collapses in. Not a big deal. Also great for simulating the AT-AT trample. The big wing sections connect to the main fuselage via horizontally mounted hinge bricks, and these hinge bricks are only secured in the end by 2 studs. This one here and this one here. So they kind of rest on either side. And on the opposite side, you can see that they'll connect here and here. So this means that occasionally, by occasionally I mean semi-frequently, especially with used parts, if you try and lift the model by the sides, which you naturally kind of want to do, both these wing sections can fall off fairly easily. There is not much clutch in either of those, or in those two connections compared to the weight of the parts that are connected to it. Okay, this is another annoyance of mine. These two sections are very precarious and they fall off all the time. So as you can see, some of the connections for the tiling along the edge here are not very sturdy. This section here that holds on one of the sloped faces of the, I guess it's the blaster assembly, is a little precarious. But once it's connected to the model, it's not too bad. And then of course you saw me struggling with these front sections here. The engine exhaust vents have some wiggle and they don't quite hold their angle. Very often I find these kind of drooped like this, which again isn't terrible, but I think they look better and they're supposed to be more of an angle. Also, due to the construction, they're constructed in two separate halves, so occasionally you'll get one half that is drooped and the other half that is not. Not a big deal, you just kind of bump it back into place. The looseness here, I mentioned it mostly because this is kind of an area that you're going to be active in if you're trying to pick this up. So just you have it on the table, you go to pick it up, you move your hands back, and then you bump the engine, and you just have to adjust it back. So again, it's not critical, it's just kind of annoying. These underside flaps, I've removed them because mine keep falling off. Oh, there's part of that front piece. That's not fair to criticize, that was loose before. These slide on here, and again, they're not very sturdy. I don't think this is a product of the parts I'm using because these two parts I know are both new. And they come off all the time. Also, since they're only connected with one stud like this, fail. If it's not this part section with the hole on it, then it's just the entire thing will just pop off. So unless you're displaying this and you really want the underside flaps, I would just leave them off. Now moving to the front, the triangular sections are a little bit delicate. You kind of expect this when you're putting them on, just the way they're built. In my opinion, this is a vast visual improvement over the previous iteration. And lastly, the blasters come off pretty easily just because it's only a hose that pushes into the open stud on the side of this minifigure neck bracket, like so. I absolutely understand the way or the reason it's designed this way, and as far as looks go, I mean, you can see for yourself, it looks great. The instructions do include an alternative cam design that omits one of these Technic pin 1/2s and substitutes a tile, a tile with a clip. And this has the effect of stabilizing the cannon in two places, one in the back and one right about here. I actually think it's that stud. This makes it a little less screen accurate, but definitely a lot more stable. And if I was going to do this again, I would probably do that. So in summary, I've covered a lot of the kind of problem areas. Overall, I would say this is actually kind of a fairly fragile model, and all the issues I discussed paired with the fact that it doesn't sit flat means on multiple occasions I've tried to pick this up and I get what I kind of term a catastrophic failure in that multiple sections come off all at once. Either one or both of the wing sections, the front panels, which you've seen pop off a couple of times, the blasters usually come off with the wings, and or the engines go way out of alignment or they snap off entirely. And the assembly is such that these are quote unquote mere annoyances to put back on, and you can do it without consulting the directions. The nice thing about it is that it tends to fail in large sections. So, like, while the entire wing will come off, it's not, the wing and a bunch of little pieces. So you can just slap it all back on pretty easily. But doing this over and over again, at least in my experience, was not particularly pleasant. So, I thought about how I was going to close this out for a long time, and even though I realized early on that I should have gone with white, this is hands down the best looking T-47 at the scale or most other scales that I'm aware of. And trust me, I have looked. The Snowspeeder was actually one of the very first models I started looking for an example to build because I knew I wanted to review one. And the angles are pretty much perfect. And you look at this and you think, yep, this is it. And you definitely cannot say that about the official sets. I don't know what Lego is thinking with the official Snowspeeders. They all look awful. On the other hand, it's reasonably expensive to build, and with instructions costing about $14, that's not insignificant amount of overhead. And to be fair, you get instructions for the three color variations, as well as an update parts list if you had version 2. This is version 3 pictured here. Running the algorithm and assuming you don't have anything to start off with, I was getting between 6 and 8 stores and between 74 and 80 US dollars. So you're likely looking at about $110 after shipping and tax in a normal scenario. Paired with the costs, there's a number of fairly significant stability problems that, while absolutely necessary to absolutely nail the shape, they do cause problems if you're just wanting to pick this up and turn it around from time to time. To say nothing if you actually want to play with it. I have very few illusions about influencing change for my channel here, but I have three concrete recommendations that I think would go a long way towards making this model go from acceptable based on the issues I discussed previously to what would really be amazing. First thing I would do is I would make the blaster modification the standard version, the one with the tile with clip right about here. And I would include those instructions in, well, I would include that build in the instructions and the parts list. So basically, you just have to add the tile with clip and modify a couple sets in the instructions. The blasters are the number one thing that pops off in my model. Second, I would try and find a way to make the wings lock in place. So you can see that both of them have some play here. And it goes from basically very little gap in between the cockpit and the wing to fairly significant. So if the design can be modified to lock that in place, either way, I mean, this gap at its largest is not terrible. It's not ideal, but it's not terrible. You can live with that. But I would take a larger gap with a solid assembly that's tied to the middle section of the fuselage any day. I'm not sure if you could do it here with mixels or hinges or something like that, but also along with the wing section, augmenting this connection strength for the subassembly would be really useful. So I kind of grouped that into fix the wings. And lastly, I know that this is a kind of an advertised play feature, at least in Brickvault's video, but I don't think that this whole grappling hook, of course the string snaps because I tried to melt it together. But I think the grappling hook and tow cable should be optional. This would reduce costs, and I don't think many people are going to miss it. And honestly, I doubt that anyone that buys the instructions for this model bought them just because it has a string and grappling hook. They're buying it because it looks great. So outside of those three recommendations with the existing build, the only other thing I would say is that a stand would have been nice. Luckily, there's a lot of places on the underside to uh, stud like a simple 4x4 stand or something like that. And if you really want to get fancy, I'm sure you can modify this to be a Technic plate with holes and have a Technic axle stick up in there just to give it some additional stability. But if you have a stand, it makes it a lot easier to pick up and kind of pose, maybe. Kind of like the GR75 stand makes it a lot easier to pick up and move around. So, as far as an actual conclusion goes, I went into this Snowspeeder build really excited. Like I said, I love The Empire Strikes Back. The Battle of Hoth is iconic, and I really wanted to like this model like I enjoyed pretty much all the others I've done so far. And sadly, I just don't find myself looking at this one like the others. I can surely appreciate that it's more of a display model than a play model, and that's fine. And I do tip my hat to Flying Waffle and the good folks at Brewfault for bringing this incredible looking snowspeeder to the market. It's just my experience was not what I thought it was going to be, and I'm fully willing to acknowledge this might have been a mismatch of expectations on my part, rather than an objective look at some of the issues I discussed. I mean, it's a good model, don't get me wrong. Just the stability issues and kind of the, like I said, the occasional catastrophic failures kind of soured me on it. Thanks as always for spending some of your time watching my review of Flying Waffle's Snowspeeder. If you've built this model, you have something to share that I left out, or have a question I didn't cover, please leave them below in the comments. I'm definitely curious to know on this one specifically if anyone else has experienced the stability and integrity issues that I did. Am I completely wrong? Am I completely crazy? Do I need to start over? I am almost at this point willing to do that. Maybe I'll try it in white. I'm not sure, and maybe it's just the parts I had. Anyway, consider liking the video, subscribing to the channel, checking out any of my other videos, or following me on Instagram. Once again, I truly thank everybody who's subscribed so far and getting us to 200. And I hope to see you back next time.